All right, so let's dive into this.
Do it.
Salutations and welcome to the Systm podcast, where we bring together creative entrepreneurs, founders, and executives to talk about creative leadership, innovation, and culture. Today, we are talking about the Rebrand of Everyone, a plant-based personal care product line based in San Rafael, California. I am your host, Keone Chong. And these are my co-hosts, Jose Caballer and Mary Gribbin. So today in our conversation, we're going to talk about how to transform a brand from the inside out using the Systm and core frameworks. So if you're an agency, a startup, or an executive, we're going to share how to define your brand, your culture, align your teams, and how to flow through expectations. So let's start at the beginning. I want to formally introduce Jose Caballer, not as the co-host of the Systm podcast, but as the captain of this rebrand adventure. Welcome, Jose.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'd like to start with this song that you have as an intro. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Love is my religion.
Love is My Religion by Siggy Marley. I would play that song in our stand-ups. Pretty much almost every stand-up. It was part of our playlist when we were doing the rebrand. And the lyrics are self-explanatory at the end of everything, at the end of all the challenges and how difficult, projects can be. Wanted to remind everybody that love was our religion.
I want to talk so far about the impact of this rebrand and why it's so significant. I know that the products are just being released now, but there's been significant financial impact already just from the work that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, to be fair, and for full transparency, there's a lot of work that was done before the rebrand was released, which is happening right now as we speak. But COVID was a really big factor for that. So hand sanitizer and hand soap became extremely in demand during the beginning of the pandemic. And they were at probably 70 million before the pandemic the previous year, and about a 30% increase in revenue for the year for 2020. Part of that was really focusing the SKUs, and that was part of the product architecture work that we did at the beginning. The request was from Tom to figure out how to best cut SKUs, and instead of just choosing, it was really doing it together with everyone, like with the founders, with the product team, with the people that had been there for a long time. Everybody had input in what products got cut.
All right. Now, did this happen prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, the cutting, it happened during the pandemic. Like, we made the decisions before the pandemic occurred in late 2019, and it started rolling out during the year that the pandemic. And a good example of that was, yes, a key focus on hand sanitizer and hand soaps was already in the works, and then COVID kind of just pushed it because you had to now focus manufacturing just on those SKUs to keep up with demand. Since the product is made primarily there in San Rafael, it's factory, design, everything is in one place.
Gotcha. Can you share, are you familiar with approximately like the numbers and the shift that happened as part of that? And
$30 million increase in revenue in 2020. So from 70 million to 90. Okay. That's 20. My math is amazing. Yeah, that's really good math.
Okay, 20 million. I mean, that's awesome. I'd love to bring in some of the leaders that co-created with you on this project. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start with introducing Jeff. Can you tell me a little bit about Jeff?
Jeff is a longtime friend. I've known him for many years, and we worked together at Consensus a few years ago, where I hired him as creative director to lead the design practice at Consensus. He's a unique soul. One of the few people that I know, a Taurus brother from another mother, who has the ability to work super hard and stay really positive, and who has a lot of experience, 10 years at J&J. The insights into how to design inside a process and inside research and inside data at the same time as intuition was really critical. And, that's why Jeff was the first person I thought about.
Gotcha. So, Jeff, I'd like to invite you in to join us in the conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about this intro song that you've selected and your role at Content BK?
The Everyone Rebrand was a really special one, and there's a lot of points to support that, right? I think number one was just kind of how we established a relationship, and Jose did an amazing job, building that cadence with the entire team, and then kind of the fidelity as well that kind of went along with that. And then, there was something special about being back in California. I'm from San Diego, California. EO and everyone's based in San Rafael, north of San Francisco. And so I wanted to choose a band that, created, quintessential kind of classic music, something in the era of like the 70s and 80s, because I felt that a lot of the discussions we had with the team were a kind of resonant of modernism. Classic rock was what came up. So I chose Fleetwood Mac and the song Rumors. A lot of interesting synergies. I think number one is that just the band itself, right, and Stevie Nicks create the most probably timeless music in that generation, which is very relevant today. The song Dreams, which comes from the album Rumors, was actually shot in Sausalito, which is even closer to San Rafael, recording studio called Record Plant. Funny thing enough is that actually Jose and I visited the record plant during one of our trips, and there was a special room that we went into that was very dark. I remember like velvet interior on the walls and the ceiling, and it ended up being kind of, if I'm correct, the room where Stevie Nicks actually wrote the song, Dreams by herself. And so there was something, kind of connected to that band and that song, and kind of the spirit and the magical realism of the whole process from the Everyone redesign.
I love hearing that, man. I'm feeling vibes just hearing about that story. I want to bring in your partner at Content BK, Aimee, and I'd love for you to introduce Aimee by describing her superpower.
For sure, yeah. It's Aimee is a super talented designer. I think one of her strengths, out of many, is kind of her management skills overall, right? Like, I think the way she processes kind of information is very helpful when it comes to kind of managing all of our projects, not only from the timeline of the projects, but also financially. So she's the one that is able to kind of spearhead all of that. And I think without that, I think it'd be a mess, because I would be kind of everywhere from a project management perspective, but also the numbers. And it's funny because we laugh that both of us are not necessarily numbers people, but she's obviously better than I am.
I chose One Love by Bob Marley, specifically because it really captured for me this sense of family and connectedness that I felt when I was working together with this team. I had never worked with Jose before, unlike Jeff, and when I started the project, Jeff and Jose had already been working together for almost a month. So I had to kind of get up to speed, and I was a little anxious about that. Everyone already had this sense of familiarity, and I'm kind of an introvert, so I was worried. But that was really kind of put aside, because the entire team and the working relationship was super warm and inclusive and supportive and really inspiring. And there's just this really wonderful, close-knit dynamic that I probably never have experienced together working on a project. So that's why I chose this song. And oh, sorry.
No, please go on.
I was going to say, and Jeff's superpower, of which he has many, I think one is that he's incredibly positive. So he's always able to find like the bright moment in whatever the situation is, and I'm not necessarily always the most positive, so it's really nice to have that balance. I always rely on Jeff to sort of inspire me and always keep this positive sort of vibe going, which is really great. He's also incredibly hardworking. I think Jose touched on it earlier. Like, Jeff always gives like 150% no matter what. And it's just really, really lovely to like work with someone who works so hard and is so passionate and committed to things. So
yeah, I'm gonna second that, because the choice of like having to do a special operation and fly in and six what do you call it, team six, no, not Six Sigma. Like, what are teams that dive in and like,
Navy SEALs.
Navy SEALs. Yeah, like if you're gonna do that with somebody, it has to be somebody that has good vibes and is positive. Because we were traveling, we were in Airbnbs together, we rented a house and all that kind of stuff. So it just really required a certain type of person, and the hardworking part, obviously. Anyway, I just wanted to second that, Aimee.
Yeah, and that seems to be a trend that I'm really starting to notice as we weave into everyone, and we're really diving through this story of this transformation, this cultural transformation, and what it takes for you to be able to execute at this level. Unique frequency that everyone tends to bring, and how it reverberates. If I'm saying reverberates. The resonance. Let's say resonance.
Yeah.
Yes. Between the team members, and not only the stakeholders, looking back at just your relationship with Tom, this isn't like someone that you really struggled to get to understand you. This is someone that really understood how you worked and what your perspective was and your purpose. All of these things in alignment really help set the foundation for a successful rebrand.
Exactly.
So, Jeff, let's bring it back to you. What I would like to hear is, what was it like when you first got to EO? Like a pirate landing on the shore. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, it was exciting. I think I remember first call when he told me about the project. And I think Aimee and I just have started kind of Content BK. We're kind of open to working in a lot of different kind of formats, and he kind of phrased this project as kind of a mission, right? And going back to the Navy SEALs kind of notion of a mission. And so for me, it was exciting to, number one, work again with Jose and just have so much respect with him, in the past few years, and especially when I was at Consensus kind of working with him. So I already knew that there'd be synergy there. We had a mission, and the first part was really just meeting the team. I've been in organizations, and I know in this one, they were going through kind of a restructuring, right, and kind of new management, changing the culture of the studio. So I knew, I think both of us knew that, the landing on the shore, I think is one way to look at it. It was really about us kind of assimilating and understanding and being empathetic and really learning. That first trip was really about absorbing as much information as we could about the culture, about the people. And I think that's what's special about this rebrand, is that we weren't a typical agency that, were briefed on the project and kind of went our own way and came back to present, right? We really spent the time to meet with everyone and talk to everyone. And I think that was one of the fundamental and most critical parts of the success of the rebrand, that we just didn't come in and give them our point of view, but we really worked with, the entire team, from the founders to the production, sales, organization from the beginning.
That's really powerful, man. Can you tell me a little bit about when you first got there and the adventures of the discovery process, going through and defining the culture and positioning the product, and then ultimately, being able to execute creative and validating that with data?
Yeah, so, I think in the beginning, we kind of set our, design studio in kind of the copier machine. I think that's where they had the printers, right? So it was fun just kind of going to the art store and getting kind of the boards and setting that up. And I think Jose and I spent a couple weeks, and he already had like a flush through kind of plan, but we spent a little bit more time kind of, looking at that and the timeline, et cetera. But I think what was great about that is we adjusted, through the process, understanding that, there were a lot of things that we didn't know. So we went in with kind of a approach that was pretty solid, working with the team to redefine kind of the brand positioning. But there were a lot of times where we needed to, be very, very agile with, some of the milestones for whatever reason it was. And so I think that was number one, having us there, our feet in the ground and in the office was helpful because we understood kind of the day-to-day kind of rhythm of the company.
A good point to add to that is almost that we were embedded. It wasn't an external, even though Jeff was from Content BK and, I was a contractor, but I was chief brand officer, and it was, not necessarily, it wasn't that it wasn't communicated. That was what the goal was, for me to be there as chief brand officer, regardless of the contractual relationship, because you had to do it from the inside, right? It couldn't be an outside job. The people had to be there and embedded. So that's an important distinction in this project.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Aimee, I'd love to bring you into the conversation. And Jose, can you tell me a little bit about Aimee's role, leading the project? You mentioned that she had something like a spicy design direction. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, what's interesting about that is because she came in a little later. She came in with somewhat fresher eyes. But when you have a team and you have diversity, and I known Jeff for a long time, and I kind of know his design, both ethic, but also his approach. And now I had a new player in the band. It's like rock and roll. This person plays a little differently. What was interesting about that was that we did have a point where it got a little bit, iffy on can we land the plane? Well, just to be frank, I lost not faith, but I had doubts that I could land the rebrand. And we had this meeting and I knew we weren't going to make it. We was like, you have this jump and you're not going to make the jump. You're like, oh no. I said, stop, and kind of redirected and said, let's just have some fun. And one of the directions that Aimee came back with just really got the team excited. It got me excited and it got everybody excited. It was kind of like a sudden left turn. When that happens, it's like, and that really helped us gain momentum.
So Aimee, I'd like to bring you in, and my question to you is, balancing your intuition as a creative, and managing the divergence and convergence, as Jose is mentioning here. Can you talk to me a little bit about, articulating some of those early design concepts?
Well, I think, because of what Jose was saying, because I started a little bit later on the project, the team was already kind of going down a path. They had a vision in their head. It's hard to get into that vision if you weren't part of the inception thinking about it. So started talking about the project. I kind of already had some ideas. I was pulling inspiration. And so this idea of developing the spicy design was really based on inclusion and like what everyone meant based on the things that they were sharing with me. And so thinking about this idea of circles and how, circles are round and therefore inclusive, and this idea of overlapping and things coming together. And then I think the idea that Jose is talking about was where these overlapping circles were different colors and starting to create new tones. And when they were placed together in this lineup almost, it started to feel very musical, and it was creating this almost this dynamic, rhythmic tone that I think, even though it was a very out there idea, people really responded to it because it felt there was this inclusive, dynamic quality to it that people just got jazzed about. It felt like music when they saw it, and they were like, okay, I like the energy of that. It felt inclusive. And I think that helped us sort of, get to the next idea of like, how do we sort of capture that idea of energy and inclusiveness and like dynamicism? What does that look like as we evolve it further?
It's like a little wasabi, or what is it that you cleanse your palate when you're having sushi? Wasabi. So wasabi, or what's the other one? Ginger.
Oh, ginger.
It was the ginger in the sushi. It was like, okay, this is new. Interesting.
Maybe because I'm Jamaican and spice clears everything, so
yeah, there you go.
I go for the spicy. But Aimee, this is really, really fascinating. What I'd like to hear is, at that point where there was a pivot in the design, what was it like, starting to build the momentum behind it and really getting the executive buy-in, to really commit to that direction?
Well, I think that initial spicy direction, while really liked for its sort of colorfulness and, vision of where it could go, really needed to be refined, and we continue to do that. And we were planning to create materials to actually share or like have a soft launch in Expo West, which didn't happen because of the pandemic, but that actually really gave us the chance to take a step back. And that, I think, was like the true pivotal moment for us to think about, okay, we created this packaging for Expo West, which we were really excited about, but now how can we make it better? You know, you don't normally get that opportunity to take a step back and be like, oh, wait, let's do like the 2.0 version of this. And we wanted to really think about how do we ensure that we're really bringing to life the natural, the natural quality of this product and sort of amp that up. You know, they're using natural oils, unlike a lot of the competition. How do we really show sort of like the good stuff inside? And so we started looking at inspiration from, you know, like mid-century modern, where it's very geometric and sort of gridded out, and looking at, you know, one of the directions that I came up with was like a grid of different fruit shapes, but were sort of circular, like lemons or clementines or oranges, and sort of thinking that they could all feel sort of circular, but still building on the original circular idea, but also convey the scent. And then we're like, wait, it's actually just great as circles alone. We don't even need to have like the actual fruit shape, because it starts, the color palette alone starts to allude to the naturalness of it, and the simplicity and modernness of it really sort of evolved the design to the place where we really were excited. Did I capture that, Jose? That's kind of like what happened, right?
You did. I mean, that is exactly what happened. The spicy direction established circles as a theme. It was also drawn from a historical reference. The inspiration for the original design was based on Sainsbury, a supermarket in Great Britain. Their in-house studio did did all the branding for their generic products, and that inspired the original Everyone brand back, 9 years ago when it originally launched. And there was the cover of that book, of the monograph for Sainsbury Studio, has the circles pattern in it. And Aimee did this amazing direction. But one thing, to go back to the data point, we put mild, medium, and spicy up in a focus group. And we actually had the customers, real customers, tell us what they thought. And one of the things that came back as feedback was that people, a woman in the comments, because it might have been it was in the qualitative online survey. Somebody said, "Ooh, I love the circles," and she was talking about the fruit shapes, but she couldn't tell they were fruit. She was just saying, "I love the circles," and I'm like, "Well, let's just make them circles. Like they look like circles. Just make them circles." And to be completely not just transparent, but the truth. The CEO hated the illustrations. She's like, one of the founders, Susan, who's amazing and amazing to work with, and a designer in her own right. She was really the creative director. I was there as her, as her channel. I was really channeling her. And she was like, nope, to the illustrations. I really wanted illustrations to happen for some reason, and I'm so glad they didn't, because the results are so much better than what my own inclinations were. She's like, nope, we're not doing illustrations.
Well, circles is a perfect theme, because we're circling back to you. And really what I want to talk to you about now is your role, facilitating this transformation culturally from the inside out, and flowing through execution through all of the strange quirks and hiccups in the road. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
My role, in a way, was to shake things up with love and understanding and empathy, and really allow everyone's voices to be heard. To really, because Jeff said it earlier, that this is a real difficult time for a company, in that management was changing. There have been people that had been there for a long time. People were leaving. Some people were, there was changes. There was big changes. That should be another song that we use. Changes. And to shake things up is one thing, but then to put it back together in a way that everybody felt heard, and it's a very different thing. And it's a good kind of segue into bringing Mary into what had to happen in order to get all those ideas executed. Because I'm really good at the beginning, to just, land on the shore and shake things up. But then you really have to deliver. And the two big parts of that, or one big part of that, is Mary's role.
So Mary, welcome to the stage.
Thank
How are
you.
you?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Mary, can you tell me a little bit about your intro song and how it relates to this project?
We are family. I got all my sisters with me.
I chose this song. It came as soon as Jose asked me to think about a song. It just popped into my head immediately. We Are Family by Sly and Sister Sledge. Because working with Jose is like working with my family, and then we literally had founders who were family members and all sorts of family interaction going on in the team, and it's it's really like a work family. And I've been thinking about integration of work and life for a long time now, and part of what we really tried to achieve with this team was living the brand itself. Like, the founders really prioritize a sense of family and connection among their team members, and you can sense that. And I felt like I know Jose feels that way, and so do I. And so some of the lyrics in here in this song, like "Get Up Everybody and Dance," are so much for us about like co-creation and creating the conditions for everyone to be heard, and setting up that culture where connection is maintained. And throughout COVID, and when that hit, working remotely, it really has to be like intentional. We did things like meditation, drop-ins as part of like the meeting setting before we got started with work, or Jose was excellent at creating like daily playlists to inspire the team and stuff like that.
Super powerful. So it sounds to me like you were really focused on alignment within the founders, within the teams, within the leaders, within the project and the scope and the execution. Would you be able to share 3 principles for flowing agile that you think every organization should have?
The Agile Manifesto, has I think like 8 principles or something. But for me, I think the most important ones that I've learned over the years really, keep the flow in teams are, first off, like transparency. And then this is so important now that we're working remotely, mostly, most of us are working remotely because of COVID. It's a critical principle of Agile around servant leadership, where the leaders are there to serve their team and showing your work and being transparent and kind of like when you're a kid, like show you solve the math problem, but you show all the work behind it is a great, it's just super important principle. And so like with our team, we started using tools that they hadn't used before, which allowed for that, and it was really fun to see that come together. Jeff and Aimee and Jose had created a studio environment physically that had to be replicated in the cloud, in the virtual. So that's what we worked on. And then another principle I would say is inclusivity. So just believing in, believing that you can achieve better ideas or more innovative ideas when you include everybody, bringing all the voices of the team into the space and creating the conditions for them to be heard yields more powerful creation in the end, with the diversity of opinions and diversity of ideas. And then, for the third, I would say it's probably like just being human centered, like people over process, always, focus on the human, aspect, empathy, empathizing with each other, connecting with each other, meeting the needs that are there within the team to keep the team aligned and people like, their grounding in their purpose, why they're there to do their work.
Yeah, I love that, and I think one of the things that we tend to forget is that for people to do their best work, they need to feel trusted. They need to feel like,
safe space.
Exactly.
Yes.
Otherwise, we get subpar work. So incredibly powerful insights. If you're listening, I hope you're taking notes. If you're a leader in an organization, these are all things that you can implement tomorrow. This isn't a checklist that's going to automatically turn your team into the Justice League and go out and save the universe, but it's a step in the right direction.
It's a start, and I think going back to the dynamic between Jeff and Aimee and Mary and I mean, it's coincidentally Taurus Gemini. I was really struggling with figuring out how to translate the physical studio. It's easy for me to have a live room and to have boards up and to have all the stuff up and have all the sprint cards up. Like, I could manage the team visually. The minute that you had to be creating, like, we got into Slack or, it was, we had our stand-ups. The minute that it became COVID hit and it became all virtual, it got really challenging. And that's really when I just said I needed to really figure this out. I was having a hard time figuring out with the internal team. So I brought Mary in to help me with managing that. And we set up all these different tools, Figma, of course, Asana for sprint tracking. And we spent 2 months training the teams in Agile remotely and doing their OKRs and doing planning together. So the ability to be inclusive in the physical space was easy because we consolidated all the departments. That was one of the assignments. We needed to take marketing, product development, and creative away from 3 spaces in the office. They were in completely different spaces, and put them all in one room and then create like an arena, like where all the work was being done and where we would gather to do our stand-ups, etc. Replicating that digitally is very challenging unless you have somebody with the experience that Mary has, which she worked at Consensus for many years in organizational development and had the skills with all those tools, which was apropos and coincidental. Not coincidental, actually, it was planned.
Well, yeah, and it's the future of work, right? I mean, now we recognize that people are going to work from home more than ever. And so we need to get better at this. I mean, like, I feel like, Jose, it's really like a lot about designing how we work. One of the most rewarding experiences was when we helped the team, do their planning for Q3, and we designed that with so much intention, moment by moment throughout the workshops. What were the exercises we were going to do together to like get to the outcomes that we wanted. So yeah.
So Mary, we don't have the product here, but you have the product, right?
Yes, I do.
Would you mind showing it to our lovely audience?
Here we are. The beautiful amber bottle and the beautiful typography, and let's do a little turnaround.
Aimee, do you have the old product? Let's do them side by side. There you go.
Oh my gosh. It's like,
What a shift.
Well, yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, it's
amazing.
It's a heritage. You can see that they're the same company and the same.
So this is a perfect time, Jose, as we close down this conversation. And Mary, thank you so much for your insights.
Yeah.
Jose, if we, to all of the young creatives out there, to the design team leaders out there, to the executives that are looking at the challenge of doing almost like a cultural pivot within their companies, what do you think are 3 lessons that you learned on this project that they can take away from this conversation?
3 lessons that for me really solidified in this project. These were things that I understood intuitively because I had done them throughout my career. I had been like this naturally, but really to codify them and to get the privilege to do them with such an amazing team of professionals like Aimee, Mary, and Jeff. Here they are. So number 1, playful. Change is difficult. People are scared, especially people who had been there for a long time. You need to be playful. You need to make it fun. I read a definition of chief brand officer because I didn't know what it was. Tom offered me that. I'm like, what does that mean? And the definition I found, it was equal parts. Like if this was a recipe, a creative director, strategist, coach, like personal coach, and court jester. Literally, that was the definition. So you really have to make sure that you incorporate things like Funny Hat Day, on Zoom, and, drop-ins and like playlists, and like, the second lesson is about process. It doesn't matter necessarily what process. We used to hybrid of the core. We prototyped the system. This project was literally us prototyping the 3 modules of the system. But in this case scenario, it doesn't matter what the processes are. You just have to have them, and then you have to educate everyone in what you're using. We used to hybrid between Jeff's experience, because I consulted with him, and we came together and we put a process that we all understood. Because I could have just used core, I could have used the stuff that I knew, but I had partners like Jeff and Aimee who have more experience than I do in CPG. So why not take advantage of that? And this divergence, convergence, and I consulted Jeff and Aimee very frequently, and then Mary as we defined the process, and the internal team. Maya May, the CMO, she started 2 months after I started. So now we had to dovetail another dancer. So Mary's song, Get Up and Dance, everyone, you have to really learn how to do capoeira, with people. You need to really flow well and include everybody. And sharing it over and over again. Jeff did a lunch and learn where he talked about rebrands at Johnson & Johnson. We had many lunch and learns about different things, and people were like, oh, okay, cool. So you really have to, process is not effective unless people buy into it. And the third, the briefing, the decks that you put together or the documents you put together for the team, they are the translation process. You as a director are translating what you heard into direction in the brief. So the brief is the translation, and the translation is the brief. And I did many briefs at different stages for different parts of the project, whether it was illustration, whether it was for campaigns, whether it was for the Expo West booth. The briefs were always dependent on what we were actually doing. And a bonus one, number 4, it's about culture. Culture really matters, like the type of culture that you have for a team, but without objectives and really key results, like clear results, and like what the physical manifestation of those things in with timelines per the sprint, per Expo West, per the launch dates, they don't work. You need a soft container of culture and the hard container of deadlines and timelines with a lot of adaptability. That's why Agile is such a perfect way to put your projects into flow, because you have a little bit of both, and you can adjust and improve every sprint cycle until the drop dead, until okay, you got to go to manufacturing. But once you're ready to go to manufacturing or to press, or to however you want to call it, showtime, like if it's a podcast, it all comes together if you did it iteratively in a way that you were being culturally sensitive to everyone and objectives driven.
Man, this is such an exciting project. Congratulations to the entire team. You guys deserve it.
I say snaps. Like some snaps
around.
You guys did an amazing job, yeah. And now it's the real deal. Like, let's see how it does in the market.
Exactly. So thank you guys all for joining us. For our listeners out there, if you are interested in CORE, which was the brand strategy framework that we really used to as a skeleton for this project, you can check it out at coreismagic.com. You can find our partners, our incredibly talented partners, at Content BK, Jeff and Aimee. They are a powerful duo. And if you are interested in defining your culture and redesigning your projects or aligning your team for your organization, you can reach out to us at the Systm, and that is at thesystem.co, no E, because we are the Systm. And thank you for joining us on this incredible journey and the many more that are to come. Peace, y'all.